Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Toby here. I'm really glad that you're here today because we're going to dive into a topic that fundamentally changed how I think about leadership and honestly, how I show up every day. We're going to talk about servant leadership. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking, servant leadership, that sounds soft. That sounds like I'm supposed to be a pushover. Or maybe you're thinking, I got quarterly targets I have to hit. I don't have time to hold everyone's hand. I get it. I really do, because I thought the same thing years and years ago. But here's what I've learned through decades of leading teams and consulting with organizations, and yes, making my fair share of mistakes along the way. The most effective leaders I have ever encountered are not the ones barking orders from the corner office or on the podium. They are the ones in the dirt, rolling up their sleeves and asking, how can I help you succeed? And genuinely meaning it. So today we're going to break down what servant leadership actually means and how it drives real business results. And most importantly, how you can start implementing it, whether you are a seasoned CEO or a brand new team lead with your first direct report. Sound good? So let's jump in. We'll start with the fundamentals. What exactly is servant leadership? The term was coined by Robert Greenleaf back in 1970. He wrote an essay called The Servant as Leader. And in it, he said something that really stuck with me. He said that servant leadership begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. And then conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. Think through that again in your head. Serve first, lead second. That is a complete flip flop from traditional leadership models where, let's be honest, the focus is on the leader, their vision, their authority, their power. In traditional hierarchies, information flows down, decisions flow down, and the leader sits at the top of the pyramid. Servant leadership inverts that pyramid entirely. As a servant leader, your primary goal, your primary job isn't to be served by your team. It is to serve them, to remove obstacles, to provide resources, to create an environment where they can do their best work and grow into their full potential. So here's where a lot of folks tend to get confused. Servant leadership is not about being weak. It's not about avoiding the tough decisions or letting your team walk all over you. That's just poor leadership with a fancy name tied to it. Servant leadership is about strength through service. It's about having the confidence to put others first because you know that when your team succeeds, the organization succeeds, and yes, you succeed as well. So let me give you a real life example. I was working with a manufacturing company a few years ago, and the plant manager, we'll just call him Dave, was struggling with quality issues. Defect rates kept climbing. The team was stressed out. Management was on top of Dave. And Dave's response, he started to micromanage every single process, demanding reports, holding people accountable with this heavy hand of leadership. And it didn't work. In fact, it got worse. So when we sat down and I asked him, I said, Dave, when was the last time you spent time on the floor, just listening, not auditing, not inspecting, not scolding, just listening to what your team needs to be successful? He could not remember. So we shifted his entire approach. Dave started doing daily floor walks, but instead of looking for problems and inspecting, he asked questions. He asked things like, what's blocking you today? What resources do you need? And how can I help you do your job better? Within 3 months, defect rates dropped by over 40%. Not because Dave had become a pushover, but because he started seeing his team's actual needs instead of just asserting his authority. That is servant leadership in action. So, what does servant leadership actually look like in practice? Let me walk you through the core principles. The first core principle is listening. And I mean really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk, not listening to respond, but listening to understand. Servant leaders spend more time with their ears open than with their mouths moving. They create a space for their team to share ideas, share concerns, and give feedback. And they genuinely consider what they hear. Now, here's a challenge for you. In your next one on one meeting, try talking less than 30% of the time. Just try it. You might be surprised with what you learn. Second principle of servant leadership is that of empathy. This means understanding and sharing in the feelings of others. When someone on your team is struggling, you don't just see it as a performance issue. You see it as a human being dealing with some challenges. And you ask yourself, what's really going on here? How can I support you? And I'm not saying that you become everybody's therapist or emotional support dog, but you recognize that your team members are actual whole humans who have lives outside of work. And sometimes the best thing you can do as a leader is to just acknowledge that and act accordingly. The third principle of servant leadership is that of healing. Some leaders help people overcome challenges and grow from mistakes and setbacks. When someone makes a mistake, the question isn't who can I blame? It's what can we learn from this? And how do we prevent this from happening again going forward? And then most importantly, how do I help that person overcome that and recover and build confidence again? This creates a psychological safety where, and we've got tons and tons of research on this, where it sets the foundation for high performing teams. The fourth principle of servant leadership is that of awareness. Self awareness and situational awareness. Those are two different things. You understand your own strengths, weaknesses, biases, and blind spots. And you're constantly reading the room, sensing what your team needs, and adjusting your approach. And I'll tell you, and this is the ongoing work for all of us. And I still catch myself making assumptions about people and missing certain cues, but the awareness to recognize it, that is the first step. The fifth is persuasion. I didn't say coercion. I didn't say command. Servant leadership builds consensus through persuasion, not by pulling rank. They present ideas and invite input and bring people along on the journey rather than dragging them behind. Sixth principle is that of conceptualization. Now, this is your ability to look beyond the day-to-day operations and think long-term. What's our purpose? Where are we headed? And do our current actions align with our future vision? Servant leaders balance the operational with the aspirational. They keep one foot in today's reality and the other foot in tomorrow's possibility. The seventh principle is that of foresight. And this builds on conceptualization. It's the ability to anticipate outcomes, to look around the corner based on past patterns and current trends. Servant leaders use foresight to steer the organization proactively rather than just reacting to crises. The eighth principle is that of stewardship. You consider yourself as a steward of the organization and its people, not an owner. You're holding something in trust, and it's your job to leave it, whatever it is, better than you found it. This creates a legacy mindset rather than a what can I extract mindset. The ninth principle is that of the commitment to growth of people. This is likely the most important one. Servant leaders are generally interested in the personal and professional development of everyone on their team. You're always asking yourself, how can I help that person reach their full potential, even if it means that they're going to eventually outgrow their current role and you'll have to replace them. The 10th is building a community, creating a sense of belonging, a shared purpose. and genuine connection among team members. You're not just building a workplace, you're building a community where people feel that they matter and their contributions make a difference. Take a breath with me for a second. That was a lot. But here's the big thing: you don't have to master all 10 of those by Monday. Servant leadership is a journey, not a destination. Pick one or two of those principles and focus on them this month, and then just continue to build and build and build from there. So now let me connect this to another topic that I personally am passionate about, and that's process improvement. You might be asking yourself, what does servant leadership have to do with lean or Six Sigma or process optimization? The answer is everything, absolutely everything. And here's why. The best process improvements don't come from consultants in conference rooms drawing out flowcharts. They come from the people in the trenches doing the work every single day. The frontline employees who see the waste and feel the frustration and oftentimes have brilliant ideas for how to do things better. But here's the catch: these employees are only going to share their ideas if they trust their leaders, if they believe that their input matters, and if they've seen their leaders actually listen and act on feedback. That's where servant leadership becomes your secret weapon. When you lead with a real service mindset, you create an environment where continuous improvement becomes everyone's job, not just the quality department's responsibility. People aren't afraid to point out problems or concerns because they feel that you'll respond with curiosity and not criticism. So let me give you the framework that I use. I call it the serve to improve cycle. So step one is to go where the work happens. In the manufacturing world, it's actually called a Gemba walk. In knowledge work or in an office environment, it's sitting with your team in the cube, in the bullpen, wherever it is, and watching their actual workflow. Step two is asking serving questions. Things like, what's frustrating your process today? Where do you waste time? What could make your job easier? What can make your life better? And then zip it. Listen to what they say. Step three is to remove obstacles. Not all of those things require some major capital investment. Sometimes it's just cutting out a redundant approval step. Sometimes it's giving someone access to a tool that they really need. And sometimes it's just clarifying a confusing policy. Step four is to empower improvement. Give your team the authority to test small changes. Create a safe to fail environment where little experiments are encouraged. Step five is to celebrate and share wins. When improvements happen, recognize the people who made them happen and then spread those reasons and those lessons across the entire organization. The cycle only works when you're generally serving your team's needs rather than pushing your own agenda. That's the connection. Servant leadership enables process improvements at scale because it builds and builds on trust and engagement and is necessary for people to care about making things better. So let's talk about some numbers, because I know some of you are sitting there thinking, that sounds all nice. It's all puppies, rainbows, and kittens, but does it really work? That's a fair question. So we'll look at some data. I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of numbers, but we'll look at some. So companies that embrace servant leadership consistently outperform their competitors on a bunch of key metrics. We're talking things like higher employee engagement, lower turnover, better customer satisfaction, and yes, better financial performance as a result. There was a study published in the Journal of Business Ethics that found that servant leadership positively correlates with organizational citizenship behavior. And when I say that, that's people actually going above and beyond their job description because they want to, not because they have to. So think about what that means for your organization. When people care enough to spot problems before they escalate, they help colleagues without being asked. and propose innovations on their own initiative. That is pure competitive advantage. Gallup did some research on this as well, and their research on engagement showed that teams with high engagement were 23% had 23% higher profitability. And what drives engagement? And that's trust in leadership, feeling valued, having opportunities to develop. And that's what are all hallmarks of servant leadership. So let's talk about retention. The cost of replacing an employee ranges anywhere between 50 to 200% of their annual salary when you factor in things like recruiting, training, and lost productivity. Servant leadership reduces turnover because people don't leave environments where they feel supported, challenged, and valued. I worked with a tech company a while back that was absolutely hemorrhaging talent. They had in their engineering department a 25% annual turnover rate. The CEO thought that they could solve it just by dumping money at it and doing higher salaries and better perks. We discovered that by doing exit interviews and stay interviews, that what we found? That money wasn't the issue. People were leaving because they didn't feel valued. They didn't see a path for growth. They felt like cogs in the machine. So we implemented some servant leadership training for all people managers. We restructured the one on ones to focus on employee development, not just for status updates. We created some clear pathways for growth and skill building. So 12 months later, their turnover dropped to 8%. And here's the kicker: they actually spent less money than they were planning on spending with the additional salary bumps, because people will stay for a leader who invests in them. They'll stay even if they could make more money elsewhere. So here's the business case: servant leadership isn't soft, it's smart, it's strategic, and it directly impacts the bottom line. So, how do you actually do this? Let me give you some concrete actions that you can take starting tomorrow. If you are a frontline leader or a team lead, start with the one on ones. Make them sacred time. Ask your team members about their career aspirations. What do they want to learn? What do they want to develop? And what obstacles that they're facing on a given day? And then actually doing something about what you hear. Practice asking for help and admitting when you don't know something. That models vulnerability and creates a psychological safety net. When recognizing achievements, be specific about the impact and make it public. When addressing problems or challengers, have those conversations privately and focus on learning and development, not on punishment or consequences. If you are a middle manager, advocate upward for your team. Your job isn't just to cascade information down, it's to carry your team's voice, their needs, and their ideas up to senior leadership. Create development opportunities, even when there isn't a budget to have formal training. That might be something as simple as stretch assignments or job shadowing, or perhaps leading a cross functional project of some variety. Shield your team from unnecessary organizational chaos. Yeah, you're going to need to communicate change and issues, but you don't need to pass along every single point of executive anxiety. Now, if you are in that senior leader role or an executive, you need to model servant leadership publicly. Whether you're in a town hall or a leadership meeting, talk about how you're serving your organization, not how your organization is serving you. Implement systems and structures that enable servant leadership at all levels. Things like regular skip level meetings where you listen on a daily basis directly to the frontline employees, budgets for team development, recognition programs that celebrate people who help others succeed. And here's a big one: promote servant leaders. If you say that you value servant leadership, but you keep promoting people who get results through fear and command and control tactics, your culture is never going to change. You have to put your promotional decisions where your values are. And then for everybody, regardless of the level you're at, ask yourself this question regularly. Am I serving my team's needs or am I serving my own ego? That question is going to help keep you honest. So, listen, servant leadership isn't just a magic formula. It's not going to solve every organizational challenge overnight. And yes, there's going to be moments where you need to make tough calls and that not everyone's going to like. But here's what I do know: when you lead from a place of genuine service, when you prioritize the growth and the well being of your team, when you see your role as enabling others' success rather than commanding it, something shifts. Your team becomes more engaged, your organization becomes more resilient, and your culture becomes more human. And you become the kind of leader that people actually want to follow, not because they have to, because of where they are on the org chart. So here's my challenge for you this week: pick a principle we talked about already. Maybe it's listening, maybe it's empathy, or maybe it's commitment to growth. Just one. Pick one and practice it intentionally in every interaction you have for the next week. Notice what happens. It's magic. Notice how people respond. Notice how it feels. Then come back and let me know in the comments down below what you discovered. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And remember, the best leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. And it starts with serving. I'll catch you next time.